While some of you love the process of developing your own negatives, myself included, I personally find it a little boring sometimes. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing the results pulled from the tank and waiting for them to dry so I can scan them. Still, some of the developers out there take a long time, so when I came across a 74-year-old article talking about a 90-second developer in production, I was intrigued. Then, when I went to research it, I was left with a few questions. Welcome to This Old Camera. I'm your host Azriel Knight, and on this episode we take a look at the mysterious 90-second developer from 1950. In July 1950, Popular Photography gave a brief report of a breakthrough in film developing, a 90-second developer that made claims that seemed, at least to me, far-fetched even by today's standards. Written by Norrell English, the article opens with, "Photographers have dreamed for many years of developers that would act fast and still yield fine-grain negatives. Thus far, some compromise always has been necessary. Fine grain has been produced only with slow-working formulas. Now a new developer promises to provide fast processing without any great sacrifice of other desirable qualities." Called Ethel 90, formulated by Leonard A. Robbins, and hailing from Salt Lake City, Utah, this commercial photographer spent 8 years experimenting and perfecting it, and for the previous year leading up to the announcement, had a small group of amateur, commercial, and press photographers testing it under normal as well as unusual conditions. The claim is simple: it will develop film on average in 90 seconds at 68 Fahrenheit. A bold statement in any decade, but the testimonials don't end there. Other claims include being able to develop 3,000 square inches of film without the need to increase developing time. That's about 37 rolls of 36 exposure 35mm film in the same solution. A shelf life in a sealed bottle of no less than 6 months. Sports photographers reported results equal to conventional developers, and the ability to use it with papers at a 1+1 dilution. One news photographer even said they tested it on no less than 20,000 4x5 negatives without failure. Not the same batch, I assume, but as an ongoing workflow. Sounds like the wonder developer, right? So why haven't most of us heard of it, and why can't I find almost anything about it online? Damn good questions. I did some investigating because I wanted to know if and when it was discontinued, and more importantly, what was in it. An initial Google search did not reveal much. A photography post from 2005 says, "Anyone remember Ethel 90? I once used a can of Ethel 90. Pretty neat stuff if memory serves. If I recall correctly, you could dev a roll of Tri-X in a short time at 90 Fahrenheit at an EI of 3200 or 6400. Does anyone know if it's still made, and if not, do you have a formula?" There were no replies. I found this picture of what the cans looked like on photo.net. This is where I found out Robbins produced other developers, including one called UFG, which I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that it stands for ultra fine grain. There's this archived Washington Post article from January 1980 recommending it as a fine-grained developer, and probably one of the most significant finds is this mention of the logo in the official Gazette of the US Patent Office, volume 669, number 1, released April 7th, 1953, where it says, "No claim is made to Robbins and the number 90 apart from the mark as shown on the drawing, for photographic developing composition. Claims use since October 5th, 1950. That's just 3 months after the Popular Photography publication. Having an extensive database myself, I ran a search and only found 2 other mentions of Ethel 90. A brief mention as an alternative developer for Ilford XP1 in the December 1985 issue of American Photographer. Ethel's UFG, TEC, and Blue are also mentioned, and in January 1989 from the same magazine recommending Ethel 90 as an alternative for Kodalith. I checked the massive dev chart, which it is not listed on. I also checked the Darkroom Cookbook and the Film Developing Cookbook with no luck either. As mentioned, Ethel has several developers. They also had a paper developer called LPD, which is a bit of a redundant name as LPD stands for Lasting Paper Developer. I thought I had a lead when I discovered that LPD was still being sold on multiple websites and even found a phone number for Ethel Chemicals Incorporated. which has been discontinued. Several websites are selling ethyl LPD though, as new in liquid form, so the name still exists in some capacity. I did find a couple of listings for ethyl 90 that seemed to be outdated, and the only quantity you could purchase it in anyway was 5,000 gallons at a time. They didn't even list the price, you had to email them for a quote. I contacted Adorama hoping to get a lead, and a customer care associate replied pretty quick with contact information. The company currently producing or at least distributing ethyl LPD is called Omega Brandis, and they are associated with quite a few recognizable names. I reached out and they had a reply in 12 minutes. Yes, they do indeed make LPD, but quote, the rest have fallen away due to consumer demand and greatly increased minimums in the chemical production world. Ethyl 90 was among those dropped, and the big question was, is the formula publicly available? No, we don't give out any formulas. Poop. The July 1950 article doesn't give the formula, and that's no surprise, but there are several clues as to what kind of formula it is. Robbins calls ethyl 90 a new combination of 8 common chemicals, so right off the bat, we know there's 8. He says that it does not rely on caustic alkalis or hydroxides, and it has less than half the sulfide content as most fine-grained developers. He also uses an inorganic alkaline agent in combination with an aliphatic amine, the latter acting as a buffer which increases shadow detail and extends the shelf life. The final clue is that it's a mix of dry chemicals and a single liquid chemical, at least in the beginning. When we look at this container of ethyl 90, it's on its own, it's just a can of powder. And as we saw from that other listing, it's available as a liquid concentrate as well. I'm afraid though that this is where I reached a dead end. No public formula and no way to buy it other than new old stock. Does this mean the formula isn't out there? Of course not. My database, my research ability, and time restrictions all have limits. So I'm sure someone out there has more answers than I do, and if they come here and leave a comment with sources, I'll update the links in the description. Thanks for watching another episode. If you want to support what I do, I'd appreciate a one-time PayPal donation. Even $5 goes a long way. If you'd like to try something more permanent, consider joining me on Patreon or buying a print. And until next time, stay classic.